Okay, hello, I'm Tom Smith. Um, decided to, okay, let me go back. Sorry, it's just had technical difficulties, and I had to redo this, so it threw me off. All right, so what I was trying to say earlier for technical difficulties was during the highest, during this whole mess that we're in right now, had a lot of time on my hands. I was bored, and this show was around. It's not my DVD or anything, but it's just in the same house. So I figured I'd watch the first season and review it, which I'm doing here now. So first, I do want to say that the show Lost is obviously bad, and it's bad for pretty obvious reasons that's actually reflected throughout the first season. Although to be fair, the first season isn't entirely as bad as it could have been, and it's really the later seasons that really get progressively worse. So the first season's not as bad, and yeah. So let's just review as much series as we can. Let's start with the pilot. Okay, the pilot. The first part of the pilot is fantastic. I mean, it's a surprisingly great pilot to a generally not good series. And it's actually no surprise that when the show originally came out, it was so popular when you watched the pilot. So in the pilot, we start out in a sort of strange, mysterious sense. Guy just wakes up in the middle of the forest. There's discarded things everywhere. Dogs running around, a dog running around. Shoes hanging on trees, and it's some sort of thick forested area. We don't know what's going on. He runs out of the trees, and then we step right into the chaos of airplane crash. And the whole sequence of airplane crash is just pretty cool and awesome. Everyone's freaking out and screaming, and there's all this, pretty good action going on in the course of the opening. And yeah, and then we get an introduction of all the characters of the season, and then we hear a weird sound in the jungle, which basically is like I just call it kaiju monster because it's like a giant monster kaiju thing, but we never actually see it. We can definitely hear it and hint at its movements because of the trees. Um, yeah, and then the second half of the story is them going in the forest trying to find the signal from the other part of the airplane because the airplane split, and they run across the monster, nearly get eaten, and yeah, all in all, that pilot is a lot of fun. And the interesting thing about the pilot, though, and this is interesting because both the rest of the series ignores this, and the first episode of the pilot, I mean, both the rest of the series of the show ignores it, and any show that tries to follow in line of Lost ignores it, is that the first episode of the pilot is very straightforward and streamlined. It's all in the present. It's all back to back to back. It's in order. Not that there's anything wrong with being in disorder per se, if it's done right, but the way shows like Lost do disorder is just to build up more mystery boxes, which is really what suffocates and kills the show. The best example of this is the third episode, Tabula Rasa. Or, yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. Okay, let me just show you why this episode's so bad. The main interesting premise this show has is this. They're on this island. They know help isn't coming. There's this guy severely wounded, and a doctor's trying to do everything he can to save him. Now, this wound wouldn't be so near fatal deadly if they were in the modern world with all prevalent modern technology, shit, etc. But they're not in the modern world. They have little of the advanced resources needed to save the guy, and they know everyone's coming to a realization that no one's coming for them. And so you see the concept of people being weirded out of hearing this guy's constant pain and just wanting him to, basically, they want him to die. This is a fascinating premise that's blatantly ignored throughout the entirety of the episode because they had this long, stupid, pointless backstory about this guy being a marshal, and who the criminal was that he was holding and moving and blah, blah, blah. And the criminal thing doesn't even serve any purpose. Like, I could understand them revealing, like, uh-oh, there's a criminal on the island if it was, like, some crazy psycho that's, like, going to kill him off or something. But they don't do anything like that. There's just no purpose in having the criminal there because they don't do anything with the criminal for the most part. It's lame. You have this great premise that's utterly suffocated by all these terrible, unnecessary mystery boxes that aren't as interesting as the main plot. Now, this leads to the biggest problem the show has from the get-go, pretty much, which is flashbacks. The flashbacks serve no purpose to the main story in any particular way. They're unnecessary, they're boring, they're pointless, and two of the characters, both the character Locke and Doc, the doctor, not the doctor, a doctor, like a medical doctor, both admitted in an episode, including the third episode, that their past lives don't fucking matter. They're on an island, they have to survive and live together, they're living a whole new life they have to live. So so their past lives don't matter, and then they waste time revealing their past lives, which doesn't matter. You know, they try to make the flashbacks correlate with the present plot, but they just don't. It's just a separate story that just happens to that happens to jump between the story on the island. The stuff on the island is interesting enough as it is. Even if you wanted to add the mystery boxes stuff, which I'm not saying is bad in and of itself, if it ever goes anywhere as a story, which it doesn't, but, you know, but that's the problem, basically, is that it's the flashbacks just add more filler than anything else. The main story on the island is interesting enough as it is. Even in terms of mystery boxes, it's more interesting on the island, mostly. So, yeah, that third episode is just a perfect example of the problems the show had already, as well as later on. But despite all that, there is a few interesting aspects. Of course, the most entertaining and fun aspect of the show is all the survival elements that the show gets into, with trying to find food, trying to find water, trying to, get a leader and, make everyone work as a group. Obviously, trying to build a boat to get off the island. All of that stuff is actually pretty interesting. And also, on top of that, the interesting stuff of having to deal without having law and order, and sort of kind of creating your own law and order in this sort of new society that you have to make to live with. All that stuff is actually interesting, and most of it actually works pretty well, actually, as long as it doesn't get too wrapped in the mystery boxes. But one of the big drawbacks is the show literally has a box that's deliberately meant to be a mystery that they introduce kind of halfway point of the first season and drag out till the finale where they finally open the box. No, that's one of the plots of the first season. Okay, the other aspect that is interesting is I don't know if it was deliberate or inadvertent, but it's reflection of the post 9/11 landscape, which I know may seem like a stretch at first, like, oh, really, you're just like showing off your big brains. No, it's just kind of obvious. I mean, think about it. You have people dealing with the disaster, coping with the disaster, which happens to be a disaster with an airplane, and you have a bunch of different people, different walks of life, having to learn. And on top of that, there's an actual memorial of all the people that have died. I don't know, there's just a lot of correlation there. And mind you, this is only like 4 years after 9/11. And plus, there's this Iranian dude, which right at the very beginning of the first episode almost gets framed as the one that caused the plane crash. I think it's safe to say it's a reflection of the post 9/11 landscape. It's kind of interesting because of that. It's like a micro enough. Like, it's kind of surprising that they had that in the show. And it's most reflective in the first episode, the pilot, like I said, which is all around pretty good. Yeah. There's only it's pretty good. So yeah, the flashbacks, as I said, don't matter. So what I generally did while watching the show was fast forward the flashbacks and just watch all the stuff on the island. By doing that, it's mostly entertaining, and there's only basically 4 episodes that I noticed that were like entirely bad for the most part. The second part of the pilot, episode 2, The third episode, which I already mentioned, Tabula Rasa. The ninth episode, Solitary. Oh, okay. There's one good thing in Solitary. All the stuff with the golf. But yeah, that was one of the cool things. Like, people needed to relax. They knew they needed to have people relax because everyone was stressing because they're on the island and they know they're on the island and they know help's not coming. So one of the characters, Hurley, finds golf clubs and he basically makes a golf course to make people have fun. What an interesting concept, letting people have fun. I never thought of that. Being sarcastic. But yeah, that's a really good part of the episode, I have to admit. But the rest of the episode's just boring. It introduces this interesting concept of a character that's been trapped on an island for a long time that's just learns to survive, which would be interesting, but unfortunately, she's just there to be a constant mystery box. Go like, oh, there's this mystery stuff with others. Oh, there's this mystery stuff. I lost my kid. Oh, there's mystery stuff, blah, blah, blah. And the same thing with the other guys. Like, oh, there's mystery stuff, flashback, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's other mystery stuff, blah, 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 flashback. It's like, there's just no story there or a character. It's just a constant wall of mystery box. And that's the biggest problem the flashbacks have. The flashbacks make the characters not into characters. They make them into they make them into mystery boxes. They make characters that are mystery boxes instead of characters. That's where a lot of the problem comes in the flashbacks. So yeah, episode 9 has that problem. And there's episode 12. Episode 12 is just a boring filler episode. Wasted time doing this, a lot of nonsense with this box, this briefcase in. It actually proves some of the problems that the series already had at the beginning, because the problem was with the briefcase is that it was Marshall's briefcase, and they needed the keys that the Marshall had, and for some reason they they buried the Marshall, and the one girl's like, wait, why wasn't he burned with all the other bodies in the plane? Because they did that earlier in the memorial episode, and they had to burn the bodies because boars were eating them. So, and the guy basically basically the doctor who buried him might as well have said plot convenience, because that's in essence what it was. Though they gave some half-ass excuse for it. It's just a good example of sogginess. The only good thing I think this episode has is the few moments we have with I believe it's Charlie. I think his name is the rock star dude. I forget his name. Yeah, I think it's the rock star dude. It's interesting because he just lost this friend that he was, that he both liked and was trying to help take care of, and he's trying to protect her and failed and nearly died in the process. So there's this bit of like guilt and dealing with the loss of losing someone that he cared about and all that jazz. And that actually pretty good. That was the only good part about it though, because most of it leads into just filler. As for the rest of the season, most of the island stuff is fun and interesting. I mean, the mystery box is kind of annoying, but like I said, most of our season is still focused generally on survival, figuring out what their law and order is, figuring out how they work with one another, and so on. And that sort of stuff does work pretty well overall. So, yeah. I think the biggest problem I do want to say, though, and stress is this. Even with the mystery boxes, they had an interesting idea that they could have worked with on the island. Like, I already worked basically a more interesting idea than what happened with the show, which was basically like the Sixth Sense at the end of it. Basically, I was thinking what would have made sense, and it even works. Like one of the stupid things the show has, though, I should mention, is polar bears. I dislike the use of the polar bears in it because it just doesn't make sense. Why it not only does it not make sense that polar bears on the island, it's underwhelming. They look really fake for one, and it's very underwhelming. And it took time away, which could have been used for the kaiju monster. And also, one other thing I do want to mention: what is up with every time they get attacked by the kaiju monster? They always hide in the same circle of trees. Like they did like 3 or 4 times in the same season with that. Anyways, so the one thing I did want to mention though is that I think even with the mystery boxes that were on the island itself, it would have been interesting if it went somewhere. As one of the actors playing one of the roles said in like a behind the scenes thing, They basically said the island like the island of Dr. Monroe, and that led to the interesting idea of, okay, what if the island of Lost, simply put, best explanation, was a top secret government scientific facility full of crazy, over the top scientific experiments, maybe by a scientific organization, for example. And that organization did a bunch of experiments doing with like sort of testing like the psychic abilities of people and the experiments into sort of creating weapons of like giant creature robot, like a kaiju robot monster thing, for example. Maybe even scientific experiments into foreseeing the future and other such things, which would have explained a lot of the stuff that happened on the island. Even the polar bear stuff, if they kept it in, would have made sense because, okay, it's just one of the weird experiments the scientists were pulling for reasons. And then what could have been interesting about the second season, you know, the sad thing is that what the show could have ended up being for the second season, especially, is what the show The Prisoner is about. Now, The Prisoner is this other show that most people don't know. If you haven't seen, I think it's called The Prisoner. Pretty sure it's called The Prisoner. Yeah. If you ever see The Prisoner, if you haven't seen The Prisoner, go see The Prisoner because that the series is awesome. The whole series of Prisoner is about this spy who decided to retire, and then as he's retiring, he gets captured and gets trapped and imprisoned on this weird out there, and I do mean out there in like trippy sense, island with all this crazy weird technology stuff, and it's really good and fun. And that's what I think the second season should have been. The second season should have been this game of cat and mouse between the survivors and like this group, the others, which would have been revealed as like this crazy organization of scientists. Yeah, playing this game of cat and mouse, trying to escape, and maybe at the end of the second season, it would have found that these crazy scientist organizations planning like to actually take over the world with all their science stuff. So they not only have to escape the island, they have to prevent them from taking over the world. I know I'm just making stuff on the fly, but that would have been more interesting than what the show ended up being about. And it would have actually made sense. I mean, why not go all out with the Island of Dr. Monroe thing since there's a hint of the Island of Dr. Monroe in there? That so much so that even one of the actors in the show said so. I don't know. So yeah, that's my opinion of the show overall and the season I watched. If you do plan to watch the show, I'd advise only watching the first season. I'd advise getting it the first season for cheap, and I'd advise fast forwarding flashbacks and skipping 1, 2, 9, and I believe it was 2 and 3, and skip episodes 2, 3, 9, and 12. Yeah. The pilot, though, is worth it. The pilot is just fantastic on its own. It's surprisingly fully good. The finale overall is even good. I like the majority of the finale. Everything they're doing, the concept feeling like the others are coming closer to them. And then on top of that, there's the whole thing with them finally sailing off. And the whole thing with them sailing off is pretty fun, too. And the ending with the kid being captured and whatnot. Yeah, it was overall, it's not too bad of a first season, but I do think it's a shame that there was an interesting concept there that they just didn't know what to do with, essentially, and just fell into mystery boxes. Anyways, I'm out. Bye. Yeah. Bye.